So, hello everybody. Mary Hunt here at the Water Office. I'm with Diane New, who's the co-director, and Diane could wave. And our staff associate JT Rustad is with us, and they're uh, backup for tech here if we need anything, and a great help here in the office. So, I want to just welcome each and every one of you to this WATERtea, the fourth WATERtea of 2022. And today is Tuesday, May the 3rd. And we really will have a chance to discuss this wonderful film, Rebel Hearts, with people who have had, who have, and I suspect will always have and be Rebel Hearts. And that's a special way of welcoming our Immaculate Heart community guests to the tea today, and to let each and every one of you know how delighted we are to have you with us and to have an opportunity to really talk about what I think is one of the most important chapters in Catholic American history that took place now more than 50 years ago, and also to lift up this film, which I hope you've had an opportunity to see. If you haven't, please take the opportunity to see the film. You can see it on Discovery Plus. But let me begin by acknowledging that we at Water are on Indigenous land in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's the traditional and contemporary land of the Piscataway and Anacostan peoples, the original stewards of this territory. We acknowledge the trauma that is deeply embedded in the foundation of this country, and we realize the deep historical, spiritual, and personal injustices that have harmed Indigenous religious communities, communities of color, as well as immigrants and other persons. We invite you to reflect for just one moment on whose land you sit and how you can collaborate with them for a just future. So just take a moment to reflect on the land in which you sit and the persons who are indigenous to that land, and how best we can, whether in Ireland or Canada or other countries we come from, not to mention the US, be in solidarity. Let's just take a moment of silence. Thank you. I want to offer a special welcome to people who are new to water events. If this is your first water event, you are especially welcome today for this tea format that we developed during COVID, when people were expressing a need for more and more community. We also offer a monthly meditation, a monthly liturgy, and a monthly book talk most of the months. Usually it's 4 programs a month. But people found that they needed a little something else, a little something more. This hybrid way, this tea, to focus on topics of common interest and concern in a more personal and informal way, but with the same rigor and justice commitment that characterizes everything we try to do here at Water. Water programs are aimed at supporting and igniting social change by sharing and socializing resources for justice seeking. Whether in theology, ethics, or ritual, Water's efforts are always geared to bring together solid intellectual information with the feminist, womanist, activist, and spiritual commitments of the people who form the Alliance. Certainly, the Immaculate Heart community is a sister group to whom we look with deep respect and care. Now, as we've been mentioning in the early going here, today is a hard day in American history with the leaked Supreme Court document. Rather than go into any discussion of that, which we hope we will deal with on another occasion, I think we could agree, we may not agree on a lot of things, but I think we could agree that we all need the rebel hearts, and as many rebel hearts as we can muster, to bring about justice. And therefore, I will, in this course of this hour, I will now offer my welcome from Water, and Jean Richardson will welcome from Kirkridge. And then I'll say something very briefly about the film, and then I will introduce our 3 speakers in turn, who will make introductory remarks of 5 to 6 minutes each, and then we'll have a general conversation. We'll close at the top of the hour, which will be 3 o'clock here on the East Coast, so folks can get to other appointments, and everyone who wishes is welcome to stay to continue talking. There's no obligation either on the part of the speakers or of other participants to do so, but we will keep the Zoom on and continue this community conversation about the Immaculate Heart community, what it has done, what it will do in the future. As you can tell, the video is on, and so the video of this session will be on our website at www.waterwomensalliance.org, along with notes that we'll take about this. So don't worry if you miss a term or a spelling or you miss a link to something. we'll put those in the notes. And those regular water followers know we always send the notes out. You always get them, and everything goes up on the website. So you can go back and say, oh gosh, you know, to your friend, you missed this wonderful session, but if you want to see it, here's where you go. So you just go to our website. So, on behalf of my water colleagues Diane and JT here in the office, I welcome you to this celebrative time with the Immaculate Heart community that has recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. After being rather unceremoniously evicted from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles by a certain James Francis Cardinal McIntyre of unhappy memory. We're delighted to co-sponsor this event with our friends of Sisterly Conversations, a wonderful community of LGBTQ plus women, non-binary people, and our friends at the Kirkridge Conference Center in Bangor, Pennsylvania. Jean Richardson is the longtime and now outgoing director who has done marvelous work there for more than 15 years. And she's with us today, as are some of the sisters. Maybe some of the Sisterly Conversations sisters can raise our hands. We get together once a year, or we did pre-pandemic, and now we've been getting together on monthly Zoom calls. And Sisterly Conversations has gone on for more than 20 years, started under the leadership of the late, great Virginia Ramey Mullincott, and it continues. And the Sisters of Sisterly are always open to new people joining, and it is a wonderful community of people and also a great venue for the kinds of conversations that we have here at Water as well. And so, Jean Richardson, I want to offer first our thanks to you for your leadership at Kirkridge, and congratulations on your impending retirement. And now, if you'd like to give a Kirkridge welcome to this co-sponsored event, please go ahead.
Well, it is lovely to be with all of you this afternoon, and I am just delighted to be here. I have seen this movie now, I think 3 or 4 times. I keep showing it to folks, and I'm so excited to see your faces. Okay, so I didn't grow up as a Catholic. I grew up as a Protestant. And but here's the deal. My brother was drafted in the Vietnam War, and I started following Sister Corita Kent when I was in high school. And I learned of your community very many years ago. Kirkridge has been a place that's welcomed people from all faiths and no faith, although it has a historic Christian background. But what's important about its background, it has been a place that has always worked for peace and justice. And so the work of Kirkridge and the work of the Immaculate Heart Sisters are one and the same. And Father Dan Berrigan and Phil Berrigan and Liz McAllister have made deep home here for many, many years. John Deere has made a deep home here. So we are one with you, and now we're meeting coast to coast. And I can't say enough about the sisters who have been meeting. I hate to tell you this, Mary, it's over 35 years. You know, time passes when you're having fun. Kirkridge was one of the first places in the nation to support LGBTQ plus people beginning in 1977. So we are delighted to be here and delighted to meet all of you. And I am so excited to hear more of your story that did not get into print or get in on video. So thank you, Mary. A joy.
Thank you, Jean Richardson, for all your work at Kirkridge, and thank you again to the many sisters. One more just got on, so it's great to have a sisterly conversation with so many people. We turned out to the movie Rebel Hearts, and someone said, "Are you going to show the movie?" And I said, "No, the movie's an hour and a half. We're not going to show the movie, but we hope that you've had an opportunity to watch it. And I guarantee if you haven't had an opportunity to watch it, that after this conversation, you will race to Discovery Plus in order to watch it. And as people have said, if you don't have a subscription to Discovery Plus, but you want to watch the movie, all you do is sign up. You put your credit card in, you watch your movie, and then you say, okay, thank you very much, that was lovely. And then you don't get billed monthly for the rest of your life to watch more movies that you don't want to see on Discovery Plus. But this one is very well worth it. I don't know another way to get it. There may be some copies floating around. But with Jean Richardson, I'm very enthusiastic about this movie, and I think that it tells a story. But as I will ask at the end, if time permits, now we need another movie about the community, the contemporary community, which is what will be really the focus today. The film is directed by Pedro Cos. It's simply a marvel with its news clips about from the 60s and 70s and the wonderful animation that brings the story of this courageous community to life. As you know, the Immaculate Heart of Mary community in LA began in the light of Vatican II to assume its own authority, to make decisions about persons' own lives and individual lifestyles, and ran headlong into a recalcitrant cardinal who was sure that these women were defying the institutional church. And I would have to say he was right. They were, and with good reason. Fast forward, they received a letter with 4 criteria for remaining in his good graces. Their leader, Anita Caspary, who's a great star in the film, put it succinctly when she replied that to his letter that the community's autonomy and the church's authority simply came to an impasse. The community's autonomy and the church's authority simply came to an impasse. The result was that hundreds of these women, who taught literally thousands of children, were forced by this self-same cardinal to petition for release from their vows, to lose their jobs, and went on then, many of them, to found the Immaculate Heart community. And those sisters who stayed behind, that is, who remained in the canonical group, as far as I know, were in a rather friendly relationship in some instances over time. We'll hear more about that. But what's important to say is that this was an instance of women taking on their own autonomy and taking it seriously. And they became a kind of model for women religious in many other communities. 50 years on, those people who left and formed that new Immaculate Heart community are an increasingly diverse and I think incredibly productive group. And they too have become a model for women's religious communities, which have taken on their own autonomy to the consternation of the Vatican. We could say a lot more about the film and the delightful footage of Immaculate Heart College events, the career of artist Karita Kent, and the like. But let's let our guests tell their own story first, and then we can move into conversation. We have 3 guests today. Carol Shulkin is the current president of the Immaculate Heart community. Rosa Manriquez is prominent in the film because she's a former member of the high school. She was part of the high school group and is now a Roman Catholic woman priest. And of course, we will hear from Lenore Dowling, who's one of the original members of the Immaculate Heart community, who is also now part of the Immaculate Heart community itself. So we really have a rich guest list here. And I'd like to begin by introducing Carol, letting her speak. Then I'll go to Rosa, and then I'll go to Lenore, and then we'll open for Q&A and discussion. And I'm sure that we will all learn a great deal. Carol is the current president of the Immaculate Heart community. Her background is in social work with a focus on housing. She was not part of the original Immaculate Heart of Mary community, as far as I know, but joined, as she said, after the split took place. And remember that 335 or so of the 400 left and formed the community, while the other 65 or so remained a canonical group. Carol's term was from 2016 until next year, so she can reflect as she nears the end of her leadership on how the community developed from former sisters to its current composition of people from diverse backgrounds and lifestyles who share a deep and enduring commitment to justice. Carol, thank you for joining us, and thanks for your work. You'll need to unmute, Carol. You need to unmute.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. And I was just wanting to acknowledge that our presence here today is largely due to Mary's idea and her invitation and her generous sharing with us in a retreat this past year. It was a real blessing, Mary, to have you with us and all that you shared. And I run into people all the time who say, do you remember that quote that Mary said something that sounded like this? So some of us took notes, and that was a good thing. So, but
it was a wonderful experience for me. It went both ways. So wonderful to have you.
Well, I'm glad. So just real briefly, it's a wonderful opportunity for me to pick up one of the themes that has been through our community for a number of years. And that is a spirit of hospitality. And where did everybody go?
I think someone is, JT, can you make sure that this person's screen goes away? I'm not sure.
It says to me it's Jacinta's.
Okay, I think
Jacinta.
we're set.
There,
Go
I
ahead,
think,
Carol, I think we're back in order.
okay, good, good.
Thank you.
So I just want to pick up from today. I'm conscious of the time. I really want you to hear from Rosa and Lenore. So just very briefly, as of today, we're 110 members, 96 of whom are women and 14 are men, brave souls. And it's a great richness that we have with that mixture. And I'll mention as well that among us, we're now an ecumenical community, which means that members are of Catholic tradition and Protestant traditions, a variety of Protestant traditions. We have 7 members who came from the Protestant tradition, continue in that way. Some of them are ordained in their ministries, Episcopal Church primarily, but a couple other churches as well. And I am one of those Protestant people who came knocking on the door in 1970. I had no idea that the Immaculate Heart community was in the news at the time that I came to California to visit. I'm glad in retrospect that I didn't quite know what I was getting into. I came with a full heart and feeling very called to serve, and knew I couldn't live my spirit and the gospel as I understood it alone. So I was really searching for community. And I think that's fundamentally why people still are coming to us today. We're very blessed with new members or potential members, candidates, sometimes we call them. Right now we have 4 people that are in different stages of discernment, which is what we call our kind of days of beginning formation. Very rich women and men, again, with a variety of backgrounds. And we have recently, I think this is the last thing I say because I want really to save time. We recently worked on a new symbol for our community and spent quite a bit of time. We have many committees, we have commissions, we have prayer groups, we have all kinds of gatherings of members and others who sometimes are nearby friends. But this group was developing a logo, and I don't know if this will pick up, but
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, so it is a red heart. It is open towards the end there. And the words say, the door to the world, the door to the world. And we know that that is our heart, which needs to be open, sometimes broken open, sometimes opened by our choosing. But that's part of the journey we're on today. We have a spirit document that we wrote several years ago, a very, very rich document. I'd be happy to share it if anyone's interested in seeing it. And it replaced our older decrees. And so it's during my time, I've seen a progression as we've grown through some phases, some ways of trying to learn better how to lead together and learn together and let go and stand up and be public and all sorts of things. And one of the the ways we do that often is to put things either in some kind of artistic expression. Karita had a great influence on us. We have a number of members who studied with her and so forth. So the written word and the symbolic representation of those words matter to us. So I think I would like to end it there. I'm very happy, to stay afterwards if people have questions or whatever. I'd love to learn from each of you as well. So I turn it back to you, Mary.
Thanks so much, Carol. And I'm very moved by your notion that people are seeking community, which I think is absolutely on the money, and that they are looking for, as you have displayed to us, a door to the world. And when you put those two things together, it seems to me you've got something very powerful on your hands. And I'm delighted to have people exposed to that today. So thank you. I want to turn to Rosa Manriquez, who's prominent in the film because of her dual roles as a former IHM high school student in the late 1960s and for her current membership in the community, and especially in her capacity as a Roman Catholic woman priest. Rosa and I met 2 years ago when we were on a committee for this annual retreat that Carol mentioned. I came to appreciate both her Immaculate Heart past, which she expresses so well in the film, a young girl at Queen of Angels High School, which was the first school that Cardinal McIntyre saw fit to close after promising that it would remain open. That was an economically modest school, shall we say, which made it prey for the Cardinal. Now remember, he had started his career as a runner on Wall Street and as a businessman, and he had a nodding acquaintance, I think, with theology in his career, just a nodding acquaintance, maybe a little bit of seminary. And he was really a businessman, and went right out to California to where things were booming. But he had a nodding acquaintance with theology, went on to build a mega archdiocese during the boom years. And of course, people like Rosa were the first to feel his grip. She went on to have a family and career, and most recently to be ordained as a Roman Catholic woman priest, a movement that I dare say the Caritas and Pat Reefs and Anita Casperys of 50 years ago would applaud. So welcome, Rosa, and how right you were when you said one of the most beautiful lines in the film. They thought they could bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds.
Thank you. Thank you.
But they didn't know we were seeds.
Thank you. It's lovely being in the midst of all of you. Thank you very much for having me. I have celebrated, I am observing, I believe it's 32 years now in the community itself. That I share with people, that's not accurate. For myself, I've been with this community since I was 6 years old. When I entered St. Vibiana's school, which belonged to the cathedral, that was the cathedral school, when I was 6 years old. And I've been educated by the IHMs since, through elementary school, high school, with the exception of 2 years, and the college. And the community has been a constant presence in my life. It is so important to me and has been the path that has been made for me in my life, that my oldest daughter recognized this many, many years ago when she and her sister, they came into my room one day and they were whispering to each other. And we're talking about 20-year-old women. And I'm thinking, what did you do? You only do this when something's gone down. And she tells me, I have to show you something. It's your Mother's Day gift. And I thought, okay. And she took off a jacket she had on and she showed me, I believe it was her left arm. And right here, she had gotten a tattoo of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And I'm talking about the OG Immaculate Heart of Mary, with the roses, with the sword piercing the heart, and with the flames coming out of the heart. And had colored in, and the roses are purple, because she knows that's my favorite color. And I thought, oh my gosh, I cannot be angry at her. I've told her I don't like tattoos, but how am I going to be angry at her? And she said, I have it here because this is supposed to be the vein that leads to the heart. And I want you to know, I always think of you. So the community is that important in my life. The sisters that taught me about the primacy of conscience. They taught me about following the Holy Spirit, basically walking your talk, which is not always easy, as I have learned as I approach 70 years of age. But they illustrated that to me so beautifully during this time of the conflict with Cardinal MacIntyre. And I learned from that the difference between an institution and a spirituality, and that having integrity and following the Holy Spirit is very messy, and that having love in community is also very messy. But it means that you need to speak your truth with love and with the hope that as a community, we will all get to wherever God wants us to get to. I learned from the experience a very hard and bittersweet lesson. And it makes it kind of difficult to understand, how do you love your neighbor as yourself, and how are we all in the same body of Christ? But what I learned was that an institution has a very dark shadow, as everything does. And that happened when Queen of Angels School was closed. Queen of Angels, as Mary pointed out, was a very unique school in a low-income area of Los Angeles, with girls from all ethnic groups. I cannot tell you how integrated that school was. I cannot emphasize it. We had girls who were Asian, white, Black, Latine. We were all there as one group, very spirited, appreciating each other and learning from each other, getting a marvelous education, an education that could lead us to college and to a freedom that people who come from low income can only imagine sometimes. For a person who has power as their basis and trying to suppress anyone with free will, what better place to squash than that school, where women are integrated, are joyful, are educated, are hopeful, and are looking forward to something else in life. Silencing the women was a very strong message. And I think today we're looking at silencing the women is a very strong message. And so the closing of Queen of Angels in our history, I bring it up constantly because it's very important to be aware of what institutions can do and what the idolizing of power can do. I learned that. And I learned from the community, from the sisters, to not be afraid and to still follow the Spirit, that somehow it will work out, somehow. That is what informed also my discernment and my call to be an ordained a Roman Catholic woman priest. I have always wanted to be a good Catholic girl. Yes, I did kiss the cardinal's ring until he kicked out my teachers. Then at that point, because I went to the cathedral school, when I realized what happened, the next time our little group of seventh graders went past him, I walked past his ring. I learned you do it, no matter how hard it is, and things will work out. I could do nothing else. This is what my mother's taught me. And at this point, being in the community out of love, I find that what I do is to help us to keep that integrity and to walk that talk, which is sometimes kind of hard because we're not saints. We're not on pedestals, we're human beings. And I'm hoping that I am there saying I'm talking from a part of the world that maybe we don't always hear in our community. I think we're doing pretty good. And I'm very glad, and I'd like to pass this on, please, to Lenore, if that's possible. And if there are any questions or comments afterwards, I'll be really happy to address them.
Mary, you're muted,
Thank you
Mary.
so much, Rosa. I would suspect that if the early IHM sisters produced only one student, you would have been the one they wanted. Because I think that you carry their tradition and their values and their hearts, and bring them to us in a very contemporary way. And so I really appreciate that. And thank you for your wisdom. I want to move on, as you said, to Lenore Dowling, who was one of the original members of the Immaculate Heart of Mary community, who left and formed part of the Immaculate Heart community. So you got to get that Mary in there somehow to make that distinction. But if you watch the movie, you know that Lenore appears many times in the film, always engaged in what I think of as outside the box work, whether as a professor of photography at the college or as a social change stalwart protesting injustice. Really talk about walking the walk and talking. I mean, this woman was taking the photographs as we see in the movie. Lenore is now, as she says, in her 90s, could that be? And claims, according to an LA Daily News piece, that my marching years, if I may quote her, my marching years are not over. And I believe that, Lenore, and I'm glad you're marching with us today to reflect on what it was like and how it is now. How lovely to have you with us, and thank you for not only the parts that are historical, but the parts that are contemporary, and especially, I would think, the trajectory that you see for the community as this movement continues. So thank you so much for being with us and bringing all of your wisdom. The floor is yours.
I was educated by the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart from elementary school through high school and 1 year of college. And when I was 19, I thought it would be wonderful to be a nun, because those nuns were happy and engaged, and they loved us. Be a nun. So the motivation now for working community, but as a teenager then, I didn't have that maturity and wisdom. I entered the community in 1950, and my first mission was at Queen of the Angels High School. I taught there for 5 years, and I'm still in touch with students that I taught then. We were missioned, as many were, to teach before being credentialed and degree. And that was one of the sticking points with the Cardinal, to withdraw nuns from our schools to be educated and go back and teach, among other disciplinary issues that were, the point of argument. I taught our high schools, different high schools, for 9 years. And in 1958, I was missioned to Immaculate Heart High School. And the joy of being at the high school was living in the mother house with the college nuns, and high school nuns, and some elementary teachers. So we studied documents of Vatican II. We heard theologians who came to speak to us. So it was a time of learning, studying the documents, deciding together in community what the challenge was and how we would meet it to become part of the modern world. That's what got us in trouble. So from 66 to 70, at Immaculate Heart College with my friends and colleagues, I was in the art department with Corita. We discerned, we dialogued, and we decided as a community to take the next step. That was a hard decision, but it has turned out to be a great blessing for all of us. And the fact that members are coming to join us because of community and spirituality is a sign that we have been blessed. Right now, we have 4 commissions, one on women's rights, one on racism, anti-racism, one on the environment, one on immigration and refugees. So our work continues in focused groups, and our work is intersectional. All the causes that we embrace cross one another. We are active in justice issues. We worked together, as the whole country did, to free Melissa Lucio. That was my latest demonstration. I went to City Hall with others to say, free Melissa Lucio. And I chair the Immigration, Refugee, Indigenous People Commission. So we're working against, for the pipeline for Indigenous people, against oil and gas industry. We are praying for refugees and working for refugees, hoping that Title 42 will continue and that strangers will once again be welcomed to our country. So I was in touch with the nuns who left us. They lived at Waverly. I used to visit them and went to their funerals, their jubilees. So there are now only 3 of them. But some of us were still connected with the IHMs through the years. So my years have been long and blessed, and I continue to keep marching and demonstrating. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. You embody literally the early days of the community, and now 50 years of this tremendous work on the part of so many of you in the Immaculate Heart community that has a very strong, I would say, trajectory as well. And so thank you for sharing some of that with us. It's when you think of the issues, women, anti-racism, environment, immigration, refugees, and Indigenous people, that's the last group that you chair, Lenore. These are the issues of the day, aren't they? I mean, we could add a few more, but these are the issues of the day. And so your community is just as on target today as it was prophetic and on target 50 years ago with the canonical group. And you also very helpfully let us know that you, and I'm sure many others, kept contact with those canonical members who stayed for reasons of their own and respected their choices. And I think that also made the Vatican completely nuts, not only that you shared finances with the canonical and non-canonical groups, but also probably that you remained friends, and that because their ultimate effort is to set women against each other, to divide and conquer women. And I think you're a wonderful example, and your community is a wonderful example of how that was not a triumph they could notch on their little belts, but that you maintained your fidelity to one another across the lines of canonical and non-canonical, did not let that define you. And I've always been very impressed with that, and very grateful for the example of that. So thank you so much, Lenore. It's just great to have you. I want to open the floor. Well, I mean, has anybody who's not seen the movie, I mean, are you leaving us now to put the movie on? I mean, this is better than the movie, I have to say. Having these 3 folks with us is better than the movie. So, and that's why I'm hoping, frankly, and I hope you'll tell Mr. Koss and others that the next movie needs to be focused on the 50 years of your community, not just the years of the Immaculate Heart community prior to and so forth, but to what you're really doing and the kinds of ministries that you're engaged in. So there's a ready audience for that. Let me open the floor now, and here's how we'll do it. At the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side where it says reactions, use the raise hand button, if you will. Just raise your hands, and I will call on people in order as they raise their hands. Please be brief. Tell us who you are. Say something about, very briefly about yourself. And please know that we're lots of people and we want to hear from as many as we can. We'll also, as I said, conclude at the top of the hour, but there'll be plenty of opportunity after that to continue the conversation for a bit more. So if for some reason you don't get your question in, if you don't, if that button isn't working or you're not comfortable, just raise your hand and one of us here at Water will see you. So I'm going to start with Joanne DeQuatro, and then I'm going to go to Marie Hogarty. So those will be the first two. Go ahead, Joanne. Welcome.
As you said, I'm Joanne DeQuatro, a sister of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary. And I was actually in ministry in Southern California when the Immaculate Heart community was not only forced to give up their positions in the archdiocesan schools, but those schools were foisted upon us. And it was a very great sadness to me that we had to take those. Now, when I say had to, of course, it's also, I believe, a mark of shame on LCWR, which at the time did not support the Immaculate Heart Sisters. And subsequently, I guess is the right word, the IHC community, they were made associate members. But for us in other communities, at least in our community, we were asked if we would be willing to go to teach in the schools that the Immaculate Hearts were forced to give up. I, for one, would not allow my name to be entered into that pool, as were many others. However, we did have sisters who went to those schools, and I remember being ashamed of some of the comments they made about the Immaculate Heart community. I feel privileged to have known many of the now IHC community, including Lenore and Rosalina, who I see is here also, but have worked with Anita Caspary during her time with us when we were staff at the Peace and Justice Center of California. Anita was indeed a witness to integrity, as these women are today. And I'm privileged to call Lenore my colleague. Lenore, I love you, and I believe you are one of the best witnesses to truth and justice. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Joanne, and a special welcome to Rosalina. We're glad to have you with us today. And thank you for your participation in this amazing work. We also have to lift up the name of Pat Reef, who was not only a member of the Immaculate Heart Order, but also of the community, and was one of the leaders of that Justice and Peace Center. For people who don't know, the community, as it were, the non-canonical group, had property to sell and put money into a Justice and Peace Center, which started the first course in feminist spirituality in the U.S. And Pat Reef was the director of that. She was also very active in social change work. And I asked somebody at Network one time, did you ever hear of Pat Reef? Oh my God, they said she calls every single day with an issue. And that was before cell phones. And right, Lenore, you're laughing, we're talking about the same Pat Reef. She was an absolute stalwart for social justice and very active in the Women's Caucus of the American Academy of Religion, just a marvelous person. But the people who went through that program, and we worked together, Water and that program, to develop that, I helped a little bit in the development of it, and taught the first course in the feminist spirituality program there. But they had all the, Rosemary Ruther and Elizabeth Schuster-Fiorenza, all kinds of, people in those early days, and they educated literally scores more people after the college had closed. They went right on in that work. So that's another name to lift up. So Marie Hogarty, you're next.
First, I want to say that I just found the documentary so informative and inspiring. And my question is, it seems like you brave ladies were the first. In subsequent years, were there other religious sisters who were in similar situations with the hierarchy who left and created secular communities like yours? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, do you know?
I'm not. I'm not aware of any. Carol, are you? You're muted, dear.
I am not aware of another community that transformed themselves into, you know, a different expression of responsibility and faith and journey and all. I know of individual people who have sought that out, certainly. And some have come our direction. We're always happy to welcome new members. That they bring, you know, their own richness and questions and challenges, and it's all to the good. But I'm not aware. I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't a community, but I haven't come across it up to this point.
I think more the impact has been on the development of co-members and associates and
Yes.
other members, associates in the work, and that has been an enormous impact. And the other thing was that the Vatican was so upset at the sharing of resources that they pretty much guaranteed that if people left other communities and tried to do the same thing, they would not be able to take assets with them. And that's been a very significant factor, I think, that you all really caused a ruckus by sharing assets in a sisterly way, as it were. And that was exemplary, but I think also was the red flag in front of the bull. Mary Jelinek, you have your hand up, and then somebody else. Go ahead, Mir.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. This film was so moving and so inspiring. Thank you all so much. This is a chapter of Catholic history that I wasn't aware of, and I plan to share this with others because it's such a wonderful example of jujitsu, of nonviolence, of being very nimble in the face of a violent, oppressive system. And given all the challenges there are today to the primacy and the privilege of white men in this country, it's a great example of how to go about doing this. So you've become my new nonviolent heroes, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would highly recommend Anita Caspery's book, which somebody might be able to hold up here, but it's a marvelous collection. She was in Berkeley at the Franciscan School when Diane and I were there, and Jean Richardson was there, and Anita Caspery was on the faculty at the Franciscan School, which is how we came to know her and love her. She was, and you know, this was someone who had had a very tough time, and yet she found her way to share her wisdom through teaching. So I was always grateful, and a great sense of humor. And Mary Jelinek, a great gentleness as well. It's a great, you know, steely in her own way, but with a beautiful gentleness as well. The floor is open. Who's next?
Let me just mention, in case somebody's interested, the title's Witness to Integrity, and it's published by Liturgical Press. So it's a paperback, and it is still available.
Great. I think Diane was searching for it in our library. Sometimes books like that develop legs here, and we don't. There it is down here. Who's got it?
Thank you, Jill.
Who's next? Mary Jelinek, your hand's still up. Did you want to say something else, or are you? No. Joanne, your hand is back up. Yeah.
May I
Rosa, go.
address,
Yeah.
Hi, may I address something that Joanne said?
Go right ahead.
Okay, Joanne, thank you very much for sharing that. I do want to share something that happened with Queen of Angels. We were quite shell-shocked when the school was closed because we had been promised it would remain open, and later found out that the message from the Chancery was that we were not closed, we were incorporated with Bishop Conity High School, and that we were all to go to Bishop Conity High School. Some of us didn't want to go to Bishop Conity High School. And I did the search for another high school simply because I didn't want to go where I was being told to go. I don't know, I'm just the kind of person I am. Went asking at many, many doors and was told over and over again, no, no, no. I didn't understand why. I was in CSF. I had good grades. I had, a great student, really. And my mother was very upset with me and said, I don't believe you. why aren't they taking you? And so she asked at our local high school here, Sacred Heart, and they were about to take me. And my mom said, they asked, where are you moving in from? Are you moving in from out of state? And she said, oh no, she goes to school here in Los Angeles. And they asked, oh really, where? Queen of Angels. And the person told her, we don't have room for their kind, and hung up on her.
Oh, wow.
We ended up, a group of us, going to St. Matthias. They accepted as many people as wanted to go to St. Matthias. Of course, Immaculate Heart would accept us, but that was very expensive. So we ended up going to St. Matthias and found out why that was one school that accepted us. They were still doing mass with the priest back to us. Girls were not allowed to go asking for support for a yearbook, so they had no yearbook. We were told constantly that we were from Queen of Angels, and we were taught by those hippie nuns. And it was very hard being in that school. Even to this day, it's kind of why I don't count those 2 years as my 2 years of education. So I'm glad, though, that women religious and other religious look to that and see that things can be done differently now and in the future, and how important it is to speak up and not so much defy authority, but question authority. There's nothing wrong with questioning authority. And a religion is not true if it cannot be questioned. It's a cult.
Thanks, Rosa. Diane New, you have your hand up, and then Mary Jelinek has a question. Oh, there's the book. Yeah, I think in your absence, somebody showed it. So there it is. Yes.
So let me say one more thing. Mary, I heard you saying something about Berkeley when I went to grab the book off the shelf. Anita Caspery walked among us at the GTU as a revered holy woman. I just want to say that she embodied what we theology students were studying, let me say it that way, as a woman who was willing to stand up to the Vatican, who was willing to be with the community, making a justice choice. She was an amazing woman to know a little bit and to get a glimpse of, and I feel so honored to have shared some of that time with her.
Yeah, she was also a very simple soul. She was a friend of somebody who studied near me in the library, and of course we studied for days on end in the library. And she would come over and bring her lunch, and invite her friend to go home for dinner. Maybe it's time to go home for dinner now. And so there was a real humility and simplicity to Anita. She was just amazing. Mary Jelinek, you had a question about how they kept the property, how they were able to keep their property. Somebody want to speak to that? Lenore, do you want to speak to that, or Carol? That's really a very interesting part of the story, isn't it?
Well, we had what we called sister institutions. And when it looked as if we were in deep trouble, Anita contacted each of the Immaculate Heart High School, the college, Alverno High School, the hospital,
Retreat Center, yeah,
La Casa de Maria, and urged each of them to become separately incorporated as a 501c3, which all did. And from that time on, they all had their separate boards. We continue to, be in touch with our ministries, but that protected our assets at that time.
Thank you. Pat, somebody else, Victoria, you had a question, I think, or a comment? Please unmute and make your comment. Welcome to you.
No, basically, I just found the book too, but it's on Liturgical Press, and the print date is 2003, so people can get the witness.
We'll put it in the chat. Yeah, JT, would you be so kind as to put it in the chat? We'll certainly put it in the notes.
Liturgical Press. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Joanne DeQuacho?
I just want to say something about the film, which I have seen 3 times. And I could not believe and celebrated and applauded really the foresight that the Immaculate Heart community members had to interview on videotape these amazing women. You've mentioned Anita and Pat Reeve and Lenore and Helen Kelly, and of course, Corita, and not just Corita, but the film that I grew up as a high school girl who went to a parochial high school in Pasadena, California, celebrating May Day with the Immaculate Heart community. And as to forming other communities, really, we have to remember it was because Cardinal McIntyre was the Cardinal Archbishop of Los Angeles that he gave grief to the Immaculate Heart community. I believe in the opening words of the book, Witness to Integrity. He is quoted as saying to Anita, "You will suffer for this." But they were the first. And as other communities made the changes that were actually mandated by Vatican II, we did not come under that. Even though we were in the same archdiocese, they were the leaders and they were the prophetesses. And so I think that's enough, but watch the film, you'll love it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to ask Jean Richardson to say a word of closing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make announcements for water. We're going to close the official session, as it were, so those who have to leave at the top of the hour may do so gracefully, which is our tradition. And then we will continue this conversation because I've got 5 more questions on my list that I haven't even gotten to yet. So especially if our speakers can hang out a little bit longer, that would be great. But Jean Richardson, you'd like to make a word of just offer a closing word, and then I'll make our announcement. So go ahead, Jean from Kirkridge.
Well, first, I want to thank you. This feels like such a gift and a blessing to all be together. And for you women of the Immaculate Heart, such courage and such strength. And at Kirkridge, I want you to know at the top, we have several buildings. At the top of the hill, there's a building called Nelson Lodge. And in that building, there is a Power Up poster from Sister Corita, because she, and for some of you know, then the base of it is all a poem by Dan Berrigan. And Dan Berrigan and all his brothers would go to Nelson Lodge at least twice a year and have retreats. And I will say to you that somehow the Spirit's moving, and I will never, ever, ever look at that poster again in the same way. So thank you so much for being here today and taking Mary up on this invitation. And somehow let's pay attention to what the movement is calling us to do across all these miles. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean. Beautiful summary. Diane New, water not to be outdone, will now show our Corita Kent. Go ahead, Diane. Let's see if we, JT, can we focus on Diane and ask her to unmute?
This is called Do Two Things at Once. This is the original Corita that was given to us when we started water 40 years ago. It hangs, who came out of the water. I don't know if you're seeing it backwards instead of forward.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
It hangs at the main door of water. So as you come in and as you go out, who came out of the water, thank you, Corita, greets you. So thank you, Corita.
Yeah, so we've been connected with you people for a very long time. I, like some others, met the work of Corita when I was in high school. I was in Syracuse, New York, which is where the Berrigans are from. And I remember a teacher gave me, remember that box? It was about this size. It was yellow. Yeah. It had the little wiggle picture of the eye on the side, and it was a bunch of the seragraphs in the box. Who had that? Anybody have that yellow and white box?
Yep.
And it had a little wiggle picture of the eye. And I said, what's that eye? And they said, oh, that's Cardinal McIntyre is watching. And so I made fun of him in that context. But I had that box. I don't know where it is now, but I had that the box. I was 15 years old or something. So this is a deep impact that your community has had on so many of us, and we are grateful for you bringing your piece of that to us today. All of you who are part of the community, not just our speakers, but Rosalind and others who are part of the community. Thank you so much. Let me mention then, in the same spirit, a couple of upcoming water programs. On Monday, we will have a meditation program at 7:30 in the evening Eastern Time with Cynthia Tootle on the goddess Sophia. We will meditate on the goddess Sophia. And then next Wednesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time, we will have a water talk on a very important book, I think, was on the New York Times bestseller list at one point, called Raising Anti-Racist White Kids. And raising white kids, bringing up children in a racially unjust America. And the author is Jennifer Harvey, who's a theologian. And her talk will be called Raising Anti-Racist White Kids, a conversation for all of us. And she underscores the need for all of us to raise, who are raising white kids, to raise anti-racist white kids. And that's very much in the tradition of the Immaculate Heart community. On Sunday, the 22nd at 11:30 in the morning, Water and the Women of Dignity, the Catholic LGBTIQ group, will be sponsoring our quarterly program. It's open to LGBTQ women and women friends. It'll be on nurturing, not just on mothering, but on nurturing. And so that will be from 11:30 in the morning until 12:30. We do that 4 times a year. Celebrate with us nurturing. And then the water ritual for this month will be on the 24th on Tuesday at 7:30 in the evening. And it will be called Bless Us with Creative Hope. Diane New and liturgy folks will be dealing with the fact that many are weary from war and illness and inequality and abuse and lies and injustices, and yearn for creative hope. And this will be a liturgy of creative hope. And then finally, just to bring the cycle right around, we will be hosting at our next WATERtea. Some of you know Carla De Sola and Diana Ware. Carla De Sola, the famous liturgical dancer, Dancing with the Divine, A Flow of Grace. And this is a book on liturgical and other forms of dance. And so Carla De Sola, who was also in Berkeley with a number of us back in the day, Joanne and others, we will have an opportunity to talk with her. Again, the cumulative wisdom of so many people. So please feel free to join us for those programs. We'll make sure that they're in the notes. All water programs are free and open to everyone. And of course, donations are welcome, but participating in our programs does not require a donation by any stretch of the imagination. We have such good supporters, especially in this particular case, the Elaine Donaldson Program Support, and many other friends, and some of whom are here present, who helped to make this work possible. We couldn't be more grateful, because our goal is to socialize these resources, not to hoard them and keep them simply for those who can afford them. So donations make water possible and available to everyone without charge. And we keep saying here, and we're saying it over and over again, if we share, among us there's enough. If we share, among us there's enough. And that really has helped me, at least, to think about both how to fundraise for an organization, but also how to share the incredibly rich resources of a day like today. So once again, with thanks to the Immaculate Heart community, to our dear sisterly friends at Kirkridge for sharing this event with us, may we take our rebel hearts to the 4 corners of the globe and do justice. So take your rebel heart with you and do justice. The floor is now open for continued conversation. For those who have to leave, safe and happy day. And for those who can stay on, let's continue the conversation.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome, Ronnie. Great to see you from Maryknoll. Now there's a community that's
Right.
walking the walk and talking the talk. Great to have you, Ronnie.
We're trying.
You are doing
Thank
great
you.
stuff all over the world.
Okay. See you next week. Bye-bye.
All right. Take good care.
Bye.
I wanted to ask one question of our Immaculate Heart friends, or whoever might have the answer. The point was made in the movie that Karita had left the institutional church as well. No?
Not true. No.
Did they make that point in the movie? Am I wrong?
I think it was a little unclear,
Okay.
and I can't remember who said it in the film. But
I didn't make it up. Somebody said it, right? That she
No,
left
Dan
the-
Berrigan.
Dan
Dan
Barrett said it. Okay.
Yeah,
I just wondered if others did as well. That's really not my question. I don't want to focus so much on Karita, but did others leave as well? The institutional church, have they gone their own ways religiously?
Yes.
Nor do what would you
Yeah.
say?
Yes, those who were members, some continued to be practicing Catholics. So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
some got married and had children.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in terms of their religious faith. If they were,
Yeah,
if they,
yeah.
you know, because that was said in the movie. I'm not making that up. That Karita had left the institutional church, so she's always talked about as Sister Karita, as if, you know, she were. I'm just curious about that, because that seemed to be ahead of her time as well. Anybody?
Well, I was just going to say that because communities like ours followed the Vatican directives and changed at the same time, we had at least one member who joined the Immaculate Heart of Mary community. That is the sisters, the IHMs who remain canonical. And especially in our conversations after Vatican II, we talked about becoming non-canonical. We didn't do anything about it, but we certainly talked about it. And that was scary for some people.
Yeah.
And it was primarily over the assets. And actually, our California province of the Sisters of the Holy Names, shortly after the Immaculate Heart community became Immaculate Heart Community, we too transferred all of our corporate institutions to the boards, so that we were no longer the owners, with the caveat that should they cease to be educational institutions, then the properties would revert back to us. But we shifted that corporate ownership in your good example.
Yeah, we were very fortunate that we had some quite very intelligent and quite sophisticated sisters in our midst who early on thought about the importance of protecting the assets so that we could continue to do ministry. And it was through their leadership, really. One Mother Regina founded several hospitals because she understood how the business world worked. And one of the kind of legend stories was she gave one of the sisters $20 and said, "Here, you go start the other hospital now," and gave her $20 and sent her off. But she also counseled her on, how do you do development? How do you approach people? How do you help them be generous in helping something to start? And yeah, she was an amazing woman. And I did want to mention another thing that we're doing now more and more is looking for points of collaboration with others that are engaged in ministry that's of a similar rhythm or value base as we are. And so we have 6 different collaborative ministries now, where sometimes we're offering, some space in an apartment building. Recently, we sold our Kenmore apartments in Los Angeles and Alexandria House, which serves women and children, many of whom were vulnerable or homeless, are part of that. El Verno Heights Academy in Sierra Madre was run by the Franciscan sisters, and they reached a point where they simply couldn't staff it anymore. And so they asked if our community would take it on. And we didn't have the personnel at that point. We were at the point where everybody was needing to make some kind of living and finding a job and so forth. But we did a transitional period where we kept it open, and it's thriving today. They've just actually added an elementary school aspect to the campus because the parents begged them to do it. Very fine school, good education and so forth. So those kind of collaborations open up other doors. Housing Works, that serves the homeless people, was started by 5 community members. And we all had other jobs, and we started the beginning of it, values-based. It's a nonprofit in its own right, and Housing Works continues to outreach to homeless people in the greater Los Angeles area primarily. And so we're founders and collaborators, and a couple members among us are still on the board of directors. So trying to share the knowledge and the passion, and the importance. It's an affirmation of the work as well, which, don't we all need a little bit of cheering once in a while to keep on over the humps? So that's been a great gift to us in both directions, I think.
Thanks, Carol. Sheila Curran, Mercy from Dublin, go ahead.
Well, one, just that I find the conversation so interesting and inspiring in different ways, but I cannot help but think when, I think it was Joanne, you said about, I belong to a religious congregation here in Ireland that has a very tumultuous life, and our founder was like that, struck off the register at one stage with the Catholic Church for her vision to do with women, but how we as women religious in the prophetic edge domain of religious congregations can be squashed into what the Vatican wants us to be, even though, especially like my order was a very, very big congregation in Ireland, huge congregation. And I was studying in the United States during the time when the Vatican was investigating religious congregations. And I just know now in the LCW, or in the Rome Organization for Religious, the challenge of being at loggerheads with Vatican teaching on certain things and the treatment of women religious across the globe. And yet, no, we can never take that step. We can never take that just one step. That isn't about leaving, whether you call it the institutional church, because I call it the Rome Church, but that the Catholic universal tradition to remain part, or if one still views that as important, that the universality of the vision of what Catholicism is really about, but how, as we don't band together enough to help leadership, people in leadership, to have that backing, because very often to be that one person who takes the clout in the way leadership is organized still within women's religious congregations can be a very difficult space. And I often wonder, with all the wisdom of the past, from the different prophetic women that took those courageous steps to highlight that what the gospel or what the following of the reign of God is about, versus how the institutionalization of the Roman idea of the Catholic Church becomes to both break us up and temper that prophetic edge still today. And I often wonder, what does it take for that conversation across our globe to be so strong that we can be there in the space that doesn't allow the Vatican, particularly from the whole way of which they control religious congregations or secular societies for that matter in our tradition, that we can still have something that is much more freeing, and that is not the ransoming out of people's lives, of people's energies that become so wasted, during the investigation of religious in the state, like all the energy that took just to hold you know, the integrity. That's, I suppose that's always my question when I listen to conversations like this. What does it take for us to become more together, so that people can, that it's the bastion can be coming up against more the solidness of that frame that so many of us are in, to support one another, to be there, to safeguard what is the truth and justice of the faith, rather than the institutionalization of a group of men about what they think the faith is.
Can I share something? I was
Please do.
never,
Yeah. Mhm.
I was never in the canonical group. I was on the outside looking in. But being on the outside looking in, and how the world outside of an order of nuns works, I would say changing perception and changing the perception of what the reality is. So for instance, two things. The first one, the whole concept of humility. What is humility? What it is to be humble. You know, I see Anita, she was truly a humble person. And to me, humility, being humble, means that no one is greater than me. No one is lesser than me. And knowing that humility is that, looking at my brothers in the hierarchy and those that support them, and being able to say, this is who you are. You are my brother. You are my sister. We don't need titles. I don't need to call you your eminence. I don't need to call you your holiness. I don't need to call you Father, because you came out of those baptismal waters the same as I did. An appointed hat does not put you higher toward God than me. So in love, you are my brother. And the perception is we will handle and speak to each other as siblings, which means there are times that I will say, you did beautiful. There are times I'm going to say, you need to get up. People need wine, sir, start pouring. And there are going to be times when I'm going to tap you on the shoulder and tell you, in all love, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're hurting people. I think perception has to change. My grandmother, my great-grandmother, she had children with 4 different men, and she was not married to one. This was in Puebla, Mexico, in the late 1800s. Even if they wanted to marry her, the Catholic Church would not permit it. She was considered no better than a streetwalker. She was a performer in the circus, and she had all these children. When it came time, and a priest who had a garden there, he beat her oldest brother when he went, and yes, he did take some of the plants to try and help his mother who was dying of tuberculosis, and said, what I have here is not for you or your family. And that's when that part of the family all became Protestant. Only 2 remained Catholic, my grandmother and her sister by the same father. When it came time for me to be confirmed, I wanted to choose a really good godmother. And I thought no one's going to argue with my grandmother. But she was not an educated person. She couldn't read, she couldn't write. I think she was traumatized from the life she led, but she was very devoted. And I thought, okay, well, let's see, does she know about Catholicism and the writings and everything else? I know she'll be a good role model, but okay, grandma, why did you stay in the church after all the awful things that happened to you? She told me, oh, mija, that was not the church. Those were just some men. And that stuck. And I think when our perception changes, I think that's when a lot of other things will change.
Thanks, Rosa. That's certainly a compelling story to give us a real insight into what's happening here. I want to go back a little bit to Sheila Curran. I think and lay it out this way, that the example that was made of the IHM community seems to me to have scared a lot of people for a long time, in the same way that the apostolic visitation and the doctrinal investigation scared a lot of people for a long time. But you do see, Sheila, I think underneath all that, some really, and somebody alluded to this earlier, that there is also support between and among communities, which and from people outside of communities. I mean, you get support from us and from other groups that have nothing to do with canonical communities, and I think that really is another thing to look at. I was trying to figure out, and I'd love to hear some of you people talk about this, if you were going to summarize the Immaculate Heart story, what would you say? Because I tried to summarize it by calling it a triumph of autonomy over authority, a triumph of spirit over law, and an example of what can be done when the roots of justice work are deep and shared, and when the spirituality is both joyful and serious, and the people are committed and fulfilled. That, I can say it again if you want, but that seemed to me to be like a summary of autonomy over authority, a triumph of spirit over law, an example of what can be done when the roots of justice work are deep, when the spirituality is both joyful and serious, and the people are committed and fulfilled. Because they don't hang around in groups. If if you come to a water program, you don't like it, you're not coming back. If you're not fulfilled in some way, and I'm sure that's the same with your communities. I'm wondering if there's other ways that you, Joanne, you might want to say that in terms of your own community. We're so indebted here to Carol and Rosa and Lenore, but your community has its own story too, and those stories need to be told. But how would you synthesize that story? What is it that pulls it?
Well, I was a member of LCWR during the terms that I was in leadership in our congregation. And while LCWR is lauded for some of the, I would say, quiet resistance.
Excuse me, could you say what LCWR is? Because there are maybe people here on this call who don't know it.
Oh, the Leadership Conference of Women Religious.
Thank you.
And it is the organization that represents most of the religious communities in the United States, although we have two, because there is another one that requires that its members wear habits. So that's the more traditional. But I often said that people like the Immaculate Heart community were prophetic at a time even when LCWR was pathetic. And it really had to do with what was profitable. So you could say it was the prophetic over the profitable. Remember, James Francis Cardinal McIntyre worked in the Wall Street corporate banking world before he was ordained and was foisted upon the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And he knew that if he lost these sisters, he was going to lose a teaching community, which was allowing him to, he was opening new schools and new parishes at the rate of, I don't know, it was astronomical, but he was all about making money.
And, sadly too, I've heard this from several priests who knew him well. He never completed his education. And I think that might have been one of the underlying struggles for him, since our community from early times was highly educated. We sent people off to Stanford and Harvard and USC, and it was a value. It was an important value for us since we were teaching others. But he never had that. He barely finished high school. He didn't go to college. We had a college right up the hill that taught a lot of, sisters, priests, people who wanted a more liberal, up-to-date education, which was a joyful place as well, a challenging place, right, Lenore? A challenging education, but joyful. And that's part of, I love the words, Mary, that you were putting together there. I would add joy as part of it for us.
Yeah, I said a spirituality that's both joyful and serious.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I
Yeah.
missed that. I
And
didn't.
you know, poor Cardinal McIntyre, and not in his defense, but he really wasn't a popular fellow either. He went to seminary in New York, and after this kind of aborted effort, I think, at college, but he went to seminary in New York, and it's rumored, and then he became a priest in the Archdiocese of New York and raised a lot of money because that was what he could do. But what that had to do with priesthood remains to be clarified. But he and he went to a seminary where the library was open like 2 hours a week or something, and they had textbooks. So you can imagine the life of the mind that he missed. And yet they said that when he left New York for the wilds of California, you know, that was the frontier where the big money was, that there was a wheels up party by the for the priests in the Archdiocese when he left New York. As that plane took off, they toasted his departure. So, you know, he must have had a hard life too, in terms of being not very well prepared, shall we say, for the work he was doing, and also not very well received. So we won't spend a lot of time on him, but you know, at the human level, that's also, I think, Carol, you make an important point that his life, some of this negativity toward the sisters, I think, was probably fear and jealousy and insecurity writ large.
Insecurity.
With the power to make it stick in ways that had enormous impacts. And you know, Rosa's story just begins to get at that in a very important way, that his untreated problems really changed the world. At the same time, look what you've done with it. And so, you know, for people who say that there's some spirit in the world, look what you've done. And I don't mean to make a virtue of necessity, but we can be so grateful. We have to be so grateful to all of you. Juliet, go ahead.
Yeah, I too really loved the list that you made describing the community. And it reminded me of a retreat we had probably 20 years ago when the retreat leader was kind of going into our name, the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And what does Immaculate Heart mean? You know, because I think people think, oh, it's a pure heart. It's, you know, it's a clean heart, you know. And he said, no, if you go back into the root of the word, immaculate means untarnished by fear. And so your patron, Mary, the Immaculate Heart, is untarnished by fear, and you are called to be untarnished by fear.
Lovely. Thank you. We have time for maybe one more comment or two if somebody won't sleep.
Mary,
yes,
I like
Lenore,
the
please.
words. I like the words that you wrote, and these are my words. To describe the Immaculate Heart community, the persistence of grace in a community that is rooted in justice and spirituality, bound by love and their mission to work for the common good.
Beautiful. Put it in the chat for us, would you please?
Oh, okay.
You type it right into the chat.
And will you as well, Mary?
Sure. And
Thank you.
We'll send them out. Sure.
Great.
Other comments? Anybody else? Any other community with a similar story to tell or wish you did? Shall we? I'll send mine in the notes. How's that? Shall we call it a day? Anybody else? Any other communities that want to weigh in here on the way out? Diane New?
I just have a question. I have in my mind the book Footnotes and Headlines. Was that Rita?
Yes.
Yes, I tried to reach for it on our shelf and I can't find it. When I was young and in the Bishop, we put on a play, Footnotes and Headlines, and we performed it and at Clues Hall in Indianapolis and at the theater in Chicago, whose name I've forgotten. But anybody have that book? that you could show, and I'll look again because my own personal copy is somewhere around this office. And it was fond memories and great gratitude to Karita again.
Are there more movies in progress? Does anybody know? Is there a Karita movie coming out?
I don't know.
There's certainly been some interest in from several directions on that, but nothing is in production at this point.
Do you know any other place to get the movie besides Discovery Plus?
No.
No. No.
Well, one of the things that was mentioned about
There
the
it is.
movie
Excuse me,
is
Stephanie has the book. Stephanie, go ahead. Stephanie, do you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say, well, it was right here on my shelf. So I thought, yes, I have the book.
Oh, good.
Thanks for asking.
We have one like it's
Thank
around
you.
somewhere. Might be in the art section. Go ahead.
This
Carol,
is someone
were you
else's time. Pardon?
Who was speaking? Somebody was speaking before that.
I was just saying about the film, because I've seen, as I said, I've seen it 3 times. Actually, during the pandemic, we went to the Lemley in Glendale, where it was shown on a big screen. I think there were 13 people in the entire movie house. But I thought it was such a creative use, not only of the archival film, of which there was plenty, and those wonderful interviews with those Immaculate Heart community members. I don't know who had the foresight to record those, but that was brilliant. But also the use of the animation and the cartoon images. I thought that was brilliant. And if you haven't seen it, treat yourself to Discovery.
You know, Shawnee Isaac Smith, over 20 years ago, came to the leadership team, and I was a member of the team. And Lorene DeRocco said to her, this is an amazing community that you might want to learn about. So Shawnee got interested, and Lorene remained in partnership with her through the 20 years, where there were many bumps and pauses, but she really was the one who did the filming, most of us, all of us. And then Pedro took over about 5 years ago. So Shawnee, who has credit as a producer, really originated it and deserves the credit for recording hours and hours and hours of our members.
Well, hopefully you have those hours and hours and hours that you can use as reflection on your brilliant and prophetic women. And that should be preserved, not just what made it into the film.
No, that's true.
Where are your archives, by the way? Where are your materials archived?
We're in the process of coming close to a decision on that. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years, and it's I don't want to name the institution because papers haven't been signed yet, but it'll be in the Southern California area, likely. So
Well, hopefully you have a professional archivist, because now that we're one province in the United States, we have hired, since the beginning of our combined province, a professional archivist, and she tracks us down. And I had a 6-hour interview, not all at once, but, 2 and 2, because she's recording us and encouraging, and she can put her hands on anything archival in minutes.
yeah, that's a wonderful gift. Yeah.
Well, Carol, you shouldn't have said that when I was on here, because as my friends know, I'm a complete bug about this question. Jean Richardson is nodding her head. And every time I am in touch with you from now on, I will be asking you where they are, because things happen like
Okay.
fires and
Yeah.
mudslides and things happen and stuff gets lost. And I
Yeah.
really couldn't, I can't tell you, I can't beg you deeply enough to do something. It doesn't matter at this point because everything's going to be digitalized. It doesn't matter exactly where it is physically, but it needs to be done. And if it's not done, and God forbid something happens, I can't tell you. It is so dear to my heart because we need these materials. So all good wishes on that project. I'm gonna. Anybody else? Yeah. Who's that? Carrie? Carrie, you have something? Carrie Roach, do you have a question?
Yes, I just want to also agree with you, Mary. Please, please, please preserve this for all the people in the future that need to hear what you did. Please, I beg you.
Yeah, and
Thank
as
you,
Joanne
Mary.
said, not just what's in the film, but we want to know.
Yes.
I think there's a movie in your community. I think the 50 years of the community ought to be in a film as well, so that we could see what happened. Both with individuals, but also with the trajectory of the community. I think that is a film waiting to be done.
Mary,
Renee,
I'm just
you
going to
picked
add one
stars
point to
on-
that.
Oh,
I
so you're
think,
gonna be stars again.
Mary, I just want to add one point if I could. I think we don't know what a difference some of communities like the Immaculate Heart community, communities like Water, communities like Kirkridge, what a difference they make in the world. And we have not done a good job of tracking the movements that we have been a part of and how we have shifted the thinking in the hearts of not only our country, but of the world. And I think there's a huge movie in that. So thank you for your
Dissertations
reminder.
in this too.
Yeah.
People to draw the lines between Immaculate Heart and Water and Kirkridge. People down when we're long gone, people will be drawing the lines even to something like this, which is why we record and keep everything. So people can share. I see the hour getting away from us, and I want to thank, in a special way, Carol and Rosa and Lenore, and thank you for staying with us and continuing this conversation. It has been so rich, and for sharing your remarkable story with us, and really for the work that you've done as examples of what integrity looks like, what autonomy looks like, and what interdependence looks like, because it's really not autonomy on your own, each one on your own, but in fact, it's the community that has made it such a difference. We're deeply grateful to the Immaculate Heart community, and that you've kept your values and your mission alive on your own terms, and in doing so created a better world. So here's to your next 50 years. I certainly hope to have a celestial seat at your 100th anniversary. So I think many of us will have celestial views.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mary, for
You can access this
having
by
this
going to our
idea
website.
and creating this couple of hours to be with all of you. It's been very rich. It's been
Great.
very rich.
And I thank you also on behalf of my dear sisters at Kirkridge, and all good wishes again to Jean Richardson as she ties up some loose ends there and moves on to her next step. But thank you to Sister Lee, Jean.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Get your cameras out, take your films, your interviews.
Yes, I've taken screenshots of this, so not to worry. The screenshots will go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
You have to save
Oh,
everything.
thank you all. Thank you all. It's been lovely.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Thank you, Jean, and for the work you do at Kirkridge.
Well, you're welcome. And
Really
I think,
important.
well,
Yeah.
I think some more conversation might be really interesting about the deep connections or I love sharing these programs with Water, and we're also deeply in touch with the Iona community that has a long history. That's how we started to exist.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh?
That's our roots, right?
Huh.
Yeah. So, oh my goodness, it's so good to see you, Lenore. I've watched you so much with your camera.
And she's still, all those books behind her, she's read.
I'm looking at them.
95% of them at least. It's one
Lenore,
of
are
our
you still doing
remarkable
photography?
women.
Lenore, are you still doing photography?
Not so much on a real camera, just more spontaneously on my cell phone. I need to go back to a real camera when I have time.
And Lenore, where will your papers be archived? Where will your papers and photographs and so forth be archived?
She'll
I
be
don't
as
know.
part of our overall archives.
Okay,
You will
great.
find her there. Yes.
Wonderful.
And I
Wonderful.
can't wait to tell you where and when, but I really can't right at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, our stuff is at Smith College in Northampton, the Women's College, and
Yeah.
we're very pleased. The Women Church Convergence materials are at Loyola at the Mundelein College, the Women in Leadership Archives, and so the Women Church Convergence, of which we're a part, is there. And Kirkridge's are at
Yale.
Yeah.
Yep.
Should
And we're
be-
getting the next 25 done because I keep hearing Mary talking.
Yeah, I don't want you to see what's next to my desk here that has to go. And JT's been working on Diane's stuff this week, and it's critically important.
Mhm.
And takes a lot of time.
Yeah, we have another film that one of our members, one of the men who used to be a LAPD captain in the police department, who had a conversion experience in one of our ministries in a very low income area, and there was gang work and all. And one of our Irish sisters and one of the Hispanic ones started a project there, and John got moved and touched, and he now has written, he has a book coming out soon. The title of the film is Not Worth Killing, and it was shown at a number of the film festivals this year, quite positive, 5 different festivals. So one of our community members, a single woman, talk about what one person could do, moved, having heard this or read the story in a magazine of a man on death row in Alabama, thought, this poor guy who was born to a woman of 13 years of age, was on death row and scheduled to be killed. And he never learned how to read or write. And so she packed up and moved there in order to visit him, to teach him how to read and write. And it totally opened up his life, as you can imagine. He's now writing letters for the other men in the prison. And there's a lawyer who's quite good working with it. It may be that he will be one of the few people on death row in Alabama that will not be electrocuted. And the film is so moving. And John, because he came from a police background, got permission to film inside this death row prison. And Mitchell is the man's first name, is going to be on that film, and Lillian as well. So when that's available, I'll get it to you, Mary, and Eugene. Maybe you can share, where it can be seen. It's about an hour and a half, very well done, and just again, one person, being willing to move their life because it matters, and because of someone else's life is at stake. And
thank you. We'd love to show it. Absolutely.
Okay, I'll let you know when it's
for sure.
available.
That sounds wonderful. And I think the death penalty question will become increasingly important. I hope it will in our sort of social conversations. It has to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to thank you again, and I'm going to trust that we're going to have another conversation at some point.
Yeah,
or we'll be all online again at some point. So
yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mary. Thanks, Diane. We'll
Thank
talk
you
to you soon.
again.
Take care.
Thanks again, Lenore and Carol. Great to be with you. And I see Judy from Philadelphia is on with us. Judy Heffernan and
yes, I was in transit, but I got you.
Great.
Great.
Always
so good. Thank you, Diane. Yeah.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. Really,
It was really wonderful,
beautiful.
Lenore.
I really, I was so deeply touched by that retreat we did together. I really, that's where I got the idea to do this, that I wanted your story out beyond. And just to say there's some movers and shakers on this call today, on the Zoom. I mean, there were a couple of women. One is president of her community in Canada, our dear friend in Dublin. I mean, there are a number of people who will take this places. Protestant women ministers, they will take this places where it wouldn't have gone, I think, had we not joined together today. So who knows
Yeah.
what will happen.
It makes me think of the comment about being seeds that Rosa shared.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
we can be seeds for one another.
And we never know what's going to happen. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, we never know. So it'll be interesting if somebody calls you and says, "Oh, I saw you on that water program, and you know, I wish you'd come and say something more about your community to us." And you know, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Well, let me
Yes.
just say, I was so moved by the act of courage when it happened, and thinking of how wonderful that was, and yet to hear today how you just continued doing great work, that the act of courage wasn't the end, it was the beginning. I mean, it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Lenore and her contemporaries opened a lot of doors and pathways for us to
Lenore,
travel.
when I watched this in the movie, I've talked and thought about Pat Reef and Anita, whom I knew, both of whom I knew very well actually. I was with Pat Reef the night that the Berlin Wall fell. I was in her apartment. I was doing something at the teaching something down there at the Justice Center, and we sat together and watched the Berlin Wall fall. And I just wonder for you and for others, how the heck did you do it from being in your community and in your convents and teaching in these little schools or big schools, and then making that next step? I don't know how people did it economically. I don't know how they did it psychologically. I don't know how they did it spiritually. I don't know how they did it, alone, although together. I mean, do you have any sense of that? How hard? It must have been hard.
Well, while Lenore's thinking, I can just say I was in the house when I came. So 71, I entered. People were needing to find a place to live, right? And I was in the same house, Hope House, it was called. We named it, where Pat Reef lived, where 3 other community members, a couple one from Paulus Center worked there, one from the high school, etc. And we pooled our money and found a house to rent and took turns cooking and that sort of thing. Shared a car among 4 or 5 people.
In LA, that's like having a bus. I mean,
yeah.
I can say this since we're a small group here. My sadness in watching the movie, I just cried for Karita. To see such a gifted woman, such a prophetic person, be so attacked and hurt by the church was so painful for me, just so painful. I can only imagine what that felt like for her, or for you, Leonore. Just I just ache. I hold that pain that was so wrong and so unjust and so hurtful.
I think Karita's strength came, for example, from Helen Keller, who was president of the college. And whenever the cardinal said, this paragraph is outrageous, Helen Keller was, her shield and her spokesperson. So I think, sort of an answer to another question, it's in the strength of community that each of us was able to make a decision personally, but knowing that we were holding hands, and that's the image in the film, with one another. We couldn't, I don't think, have made it alone. And so it's a testament to testimony about the beauty and the joy and the peace and the strength that comes being joined with one another, and in spirit and heart, and that continues today. So, and the other thing about Pat Reed, for me, she was deeply, deeply spiritual. We were in the same prayer group. She was an activist. She was ecumenical. She joined with other faiths in forming groups on hunger. She was a co-founder of the LA Hunger Coalition. And then when it came time to protest the war, she and others from the Jewish community, Episcopal community, joined hands to create a broader community in LA to take a stand against the war. So my model for the spiritual and the activist, not separate, you know, as Richard Gore points out, but strengthening one another and embodying love of people, work for justice, and bound to others in community. But Pat Reef is for me, the exemplar of that. Intelligent, super brilliant, as Mary knows, and you know, all of that, that's remarkable for in one person to have so many gifts, and she influenced most of us.
I was on the walk board with Pat for many, many years, and I also I wasn't the first. I don't know which number I was when she invited me to teach at the institute. Yeah, she was an incredible woman.
I remember, Diane, when she came to Water, and she came to consult us, and I thought, something's wrong with this picture. You know, she was starting the program, and we were starting Water, and she came literally, and it was a beautiful, you know, experience of sharing and trying to, and we really were mutually influential, I think, in how that worked. And then she said, well, would you come and teach the first course? And I said, oh, I'd be delighted. But I mean, Pat Reef was consulting with us. It's just, there was something backwards about that. But she also was, and I think the film misses this part of her. There was a feisty character to Pat.
Oh yeah,
feisty.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
you know, if you see her in the movie, she's really rather gracious and lovely, and she's all of that. But this is a woman who smoked cigarettes and played tennis. I mean, good luck with that.
Yep.
And
And
she
went to Cuba.
yes, of course. And
When you couldn't do it.
Tennis with all the time, and you know, I mean, she was very complete as a person. You know, she Pat Reef could do and be so many things. PhD in philosophy. I mean, this wasn't it philosophy. I think was her degree. I mean, this is not an easy thing. So she was a great role model for me and a great friend. I enjoyed her, and I was sad to do the first Pat Reef Memorial Lecture as well. I did the first one out there when they started it, and I was honored and delighted, but I was deeply saddened to have to do that because we lost her way too early.
Yeah.
Thinking what she would be saying if she were sitting here now, she would be, you know, screaming about the war in Ukraine and American influence, and
screaming
about the, you know, I mean, she and people at Network really did come to hear from her almost every day. That she would call, or they'd get a letter. Some of them never met her, but she was a fabulous social justice advocate.
Yeah,
really fabulous.
We have some wonderful tapes, lecture tapes from her that are in our archives, and just to hear her voice, you know, that kind of deep, creamy voice, and then she says these very challenging things.
Yeah, like she hoped never to see Cardinal McIntyre again. Just never hope to hear from him. You know? Boom. Oh, great. Well, listen, thank you all so much. I feel her spirit with us here, and I really thank you so much. It's a great event, and I hope that it has some real bounce for you too. That you know, some people contact you or have other ways of continuing. Because I think what we talked about in the retreat, which was connecting the groups, you're certainly doing that in a wonderful way.
Yeah, I think, to stir up hope, right? Stirring up some hope and action. Yeah.
That's right.
Could I just tell you one thing? I bought a Karita print. I love you very much to give to someone. And I've always loved her and the peace things and all I love. But then when I went to Boston, I saw her artwork on the water tower. And the
Yeah.
people I was driving said, Judy, you got to pay attention to the road. But it was just so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
been
thank you all.
recently repainted, actually. So you probably saw it pretty bright and fresh.
Yeah,
They-
I think it was 1983.
Yeah, they redid it with the same color and everything, of course.
Wow. Wow.
So Judy is a priest in Philadelphia, one of the early women ordained prior to the Roman Catholic women priests. And
Ah,
she is the pastor of a house church that has a lot of wonderful people in it. So
oh, great.
in fact, if
Thank
you.
you.
I don't know if you saw the billboard, the Catholic women priest billboard with the woman with her hands up like this. It was the billboard was put up in many cities, and the role model for the billboard, of course, it's a photograph. Of Judy.
Ah,
So she's the role model. She's not a little church.
great.
So, folks, thank you. Have a great
Okay,
day.
thank
It's lovely
Thank you for
to
all
meet
you
Thank